All right, so today we're diving into A Season in Hell by Arthur Rimbaud.
Oh, yeah.
This one's not exactly a light reading,
Definitely no.
published in 1873.
Okay.
And it's this really intense autobiographical piece, kind of born out of Rimbaud's crazy relationship with the Pope Paul Verlaine.
Oh, wow.
And get this,
Okay.
Rimbaud actually paid to have it published himself.
Wow. So he really wanted this out there, huh?
Yeah, like almost a desperation to be heard.
Right.
To think when A Season in Hell first came out, it was basically ignored.
Oh, really?
And it took years before people recognized it as this like foundational piece of modern literature.
Interesting. So ahead of its time then, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of ahead of his time, this guy was barely out of his teens.
Right.
And he's already dealing with these huge themes.
Yeah.
Like alienation and spiritual crisis stuff that would later become like central to 20th century thought.
It's almost prophetic.
It is.
So we have this incredibly personal text from a poet who walked away from poetry at the height of his potential. So what I'm wondering is, what led Rimbaud to this hell in the first place?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah. And what was he hoping to find there?
Well, the work itself is structured as this descent into hell and an attempted redemption.
Okay.
But it's important to understand that this hell is not a physical place.
Right, not like literally flames and devils and stuff.
No, it's more a psychological and spiritual state, a symbol of this turbulent inner journey.
So more like a crucible, a trial by fire where he's confronting his darkest fears and desires.
Exactly. Rimbaud really grapples with sin and suffering. He doesn't shy away from those depths.
So he's saying that confronting these things head on is the only way to rediscover his humanity.
I think so, yeah. And I think that resonates with anyone who's ever faced, like, serious personal struggle.
That makes me think about the line, I is another.
Oh, absolutely.
How does that fit into this idea of a fragmented self going through this intense transformation?
That quote, "Je gêne not," in the original French is really key to understanding Rimbaud. It shows this profound sense of alienation, this feeling of being split, almost like he's watching himself from outside his own body.
It's like that experience of feeling like a stranger to yourself.
Exactly, lost in your own identity.
We see this internal struggle playing out, but there's also this huge rejection of external forces, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a personal crisis. It's like a full-on rebellion against the world.
Right. A Season in Hell is a total critique of what Rimbaud saw as stifling and hypocritical.
So he's condemning things like bourgeois values, organized religion.
Exactly, even traditional art.
Wow, like he's dismantling everything around him to rebuild it on his own terms.
Yeah, it's fascinating how he's almost predicting later philosophical movements.
Like nihilism.
Yes, nihilism, existentialism, all that questioning of societal norms.
What's really interesting is how Rimbaud's personal struggle reflects these larger societal anxieties.
Definitely. And his focus on individual experience really foreshadows these later schools of thought.
Right, and even the way the book is structured, this fragmented style with these episodic visions, it mirrors this sense of inner chaos and societal breakdown.
The form reflecting the content.
Yeah, powerful stuff. But let's dig into some of the more personal themes,
Okay.
like his depiction of love.
Right. It's pretty intense.
It's not a romantic comedy, that's for sure.
No, Rimbaud portrays love as this force that is both sublime and devastating.
Capable of like lifting you up and then shattering you against the rocks.
Exactly. And his relationship with Verlaine really exemplifies that.
Right, this back and forth between the sublime and the destructive.
There's this mix of eroticism, guilt, sin.
It's like he's constantly fighting between desire and needing to atone.
That push and pull, yearning for connection, but also fearing the consequences.
Definitely adds to the emotional weight of the text.
It does.
But where does he find solace in all this turmoil?
Good question, because he's obviously looking for something beyond societal norms and even personal relationships.
Right, so where does he turn?
Well, that's where we see Rimbaud turning to the primal and instinctive.
Okay.
He finds comfort in nature, in the rawness of it. And he even explores these alternative forms of spirituality, like paganism.
So he's trying to connect with something older, more authentic.
I think so, yeah, something beyond the constraints of modern life and Christianity.
And this rejection of established systems that carries over to his writing style too, right?
Absolutely. He's not content with traditional poetry.
He needed something new.
Exactly. Rimbaud revolutionized poetic form with this prose poetic style.
So he's not bound by those traditional verse structures.
Right. He blends genres and creates this fluid and emotionally charged form of expression.
Like poetry that flows like prose. but with that same intensity.
Exactly.
He really needed a new language for these groundbreaking ideas.
It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it.
And his language is so rich with symbolism,
It is.
almost surreal at times.
Religious imagery, demonic figures, hallucinations.
It's all there.
Yeah, creating this vivid tapestry of his inner world.
A style that would go on to heavily influence later movements like surrealism. It's like he opened a door to a whole new way of experiencing and expressing the world.
He did, and that's what we'll be exploring next.
Right, diving into Rimbaud's legacy and the impact of his artistic innovation. So stick with us.
Looking forward to it. So welcome back to our deep dive into A Season in Hell.
We've been exploring the life and work of Arthur Rimbaud.
Right, this fascinating figure who kind of exploded onto the literary scene, changed poetry forever, and then just disappeared.
Yeah, and his masterpiece, A Season in Hell, it still resonates with readers over a century later.
Definitely.
It grapples with these really big themes, you know, alienation, rebellion, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels kind of meaningless.
Yeah, but what strikes me is how this works. That's so personal, so autobiographical.
Right.
It goes beyond the specifics of Rimbaud's life and speaks to something universal about what it means to be human.
It's not just a historical artifact. It's a living text that continues to challenge and inspire us.
Exactly. And one of the reasons it's so powerful, I think, is its ambiguity. Rimbaud doesn't give us easy answers or neat resolutions.
Right.
He leaves us with questions, with a feeling of unease, even a touch of despair.
But within that despair, there's also a glimmer of hope.
There is.
It's like he's saying life is tough, you know,
Yeah.
it's full of contradictions and pain and disillusionment. But even in the midst of all that darkness,
There's possibility.
right, possibility for growth, for transformation, for seeing the world and our place in it in a new way.
And that's where Rimbaud's influence becomes really profound.
Yeah.
He doesn't just describe the darkness, he embraces it. He doesn't shy away from the hard questions, he dives right in.
And in doing so, he gives us permission to do the same.
Exactly.
It's like he's giving us this roadmap for navigating uncertainty, saying it's okay to feel lost, to question everything, to rebel against the norms. In fact, he's saying it's necessary.
It is.
It's through that process of questioning and rebellion that we can figure out who we are and what we believe in.
Absolutely. And that message is so relevant for young people today.
Especially today.
They're facing a world that's increasingly complex and uncertain. A world where the old rules don't seem to apply anymore.
Right.
And Rimbaud's work gives them a way to navigate that uncertainty, to find meaning and purpose in the chaos.
He's like a patron saint of the misfits and the rebels.
Yes.
He reminds us that it's okay to be different, to challenge the status quo, to create our own paths.
And he shows us that art can be this powerful tool for self-discovery.
For expressing those deep down thoughts and feelings.
Exactly, and for connecting with others who share that sense of alienation and longing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into A Season in Hell, I'm curious what you think Rimbaud's most lasting contribution to literature and art is.
That's a great question, and I think it's multifaceted.
Right?
On a purely stylistic level, Rimbaud revolutionized poetry.
Right.
He broke free from those traditional forms and created a new language that was fluid, visceral, and able to express the complexities of modern life.
Yeah.
You can see his influence in countless writers and artists who followed him.
From the surrealists to the beats.
Even to contemporary poets and musicians who are still experimenting with form and language.
His impact on poetry is undeniable.
It is.
But I think there's something even deeper at play here.
Okay, what's that?
His willingness to confront the darkness, to grapple with those really tough questions about existence.
Yeah.
It opened up new possibilities for artistic expression.
He showed us that art can be a space for exploring the full range of human experience.
Not just the beautiful or the sublime, but also the ugly, the painful, the chaotic.
Absolutely. And by embracing that darkness, he paradoxically illuminated a path towards a more authentic and meaningful life.
Right. He reminded us that even in the midst of despair, there's always a possibility for hope, for transformation, for finding beauty and connection in unexpected places.
And that's a message that still resonates with us today.
Definitely in a world that often feels overwhelming and confusing. Rimbaud's work reminds us that it's okay to feel lost, to question everything, to search for our own truths.
And it inspires us to use art as a tool for self-discovery, for connection, for creating a more meaningful and authentic life. That's what makes A Season in Hell such a powerful and enduring work of art.
It's not just a book, it's an experience.
It is a journey into the depths of the human psyche, a confrontation with our own demons, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
It leaves us with this sense of wonder, a sense of possibility, and maybe most importantly, a sense of hope.
Definitely.
But before we wrap up our journey into Rimbaud's world, I think it would be helpful to look at some specific examples from the text.
Okay, yeah, good idea.
What are some passages that really stand out to you as embodying these powerful themes?
Oh, there are so many. But one that always gets me is the opening line of the work. One time, if my memory serves me well, my life was a feast where all hearts opened wide, where all wines flowed.
It's such a vivid image,
Yeah.
so full of life and exuberance, but knowing what we know about the work,
Yeah.
it feels almost like a foreshadowing of the loss and disillusionment to come.
Right, it sets the stage for that descent into hell.
Exactly. It creates this stark contrast, this sense of a paradise lost.
And then, of course, there's that powerful line, I is another, which we talked about earlier.
Right.
But it's worth revisiting because it captures Rimbaud's sense of alienation so perfectly, that fragmented self.
Hmm.
He's not just saying he feels different, he's suggesting that the very idea of I is unstable fluid, constantly changing.
It's almost like he's anticipating the ideas of psychoanalysis.
Yeah, that idea that the self isn't a unified thing, but rather a collection of all these conflicting desires and impulses.
And then there are the passages where he just rails against societal norms.
Oh, yeah. Like when he writes, I have stretched ropes from steeple to steeple, garlands from window to window, golden chains from star to star, and I dance.
That image is so striking, so full of defiance, even blasphemy.
It is.
He's mocking religious institutions, rejecting the established order, and creating his own world in its place.
Chaotic and beautiful.
But he's still using religious imagery, just subverting it to express his own spiritual yearning.
It highlights the complexity of his rebellion.
Right? He's not rejecting spirituality altogether. He's rejecting the dogma, the
Right.
hypocrisy, the constraints of organized religion.
He's searching for something more authentic, more primal.
And you see that yearning for the primal in his descriptions of nature.
You do. There's that beautiful passage where he writes, I embraced the summer dawn. Nothing stirred yet on the palace fronts. The water was dead. The shadow camp had not yet lifted from the road of the woods. I walked breathing in the coolness, and I felt the forehead of the hills bathed in pale light.
There's so much tranquility in those lines.
There is, you can almost feel that sense of peace and connection he finds in nature.
Such a stark contrast to the turmoil he experiences within himself and in society.
Exactly.
It's like nature becomes this mirror for his own internal landscape.
Reflecting both the beauty and the turmoil.
And it's through these vivid descriptions, these powerful images, that he pulls us into his world.
And lets us feel the intensity of his experience, the pain and the ecstasy, the despair and the yearning.
It's a visceral experience reading his work.
It is.
And it's not just about the emotional impact, it's about the ideas he's wrestling with.
Right. The themes of alienation, rebellion, the search for meaning, all these things that are still so relevant to readers today.
Rimbaud's work continues to speak to us on such a personal level.
It does.
It challenges us to confront our own demons, to question our assumptions about the world, and to find our own paths to meaning and authenticity.
But we haven't even talked about the impact his work has had on other artists.
You're right, we've talked about the themes, the style, the impact on individual readers. But what about Rimbaud's broader influence on art and literature?
How has his work inspired other creative minds?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Rimbaud's legacy goes way beyond his own lifetime.
His influence can be seen in the work of so many writers, musicians, filmmakers, visual artists.
Stay with us as we uncover the far-reaching impact of A Season in Hell.
So welcome back to our deep dive into A Season in Hell. We've been unpacking this incredibly dense and powerful work, tracing the threads of Rimbaud's struggles, his innovations, and these themes that are still so relevant today.
And as we move into this final part of our exploration,
Right.
I'm really struck by the ripple effect of Rimbaud's work.
Yeah.
It's not just contained to the pages of A Season in Hell. It's like he tossed a stone into the still pond of the art world, and the ripples keep spreading out, touching other artists across time and disciplines.
Like he gave them a blueprint for artistic rebellion.
Yeah.
This willingness to break free from convention and dive into the rawness of human experience.
Exactly. So let's trace those ripples.
Okay.
Who are some of the artists and writers directly influenced by Rimbaud's vision?
Good question.
Well, think about the surrealists.
Okay.
Artists like Salvador Dali, writers like Andre Breton, they were fascinated by the power of the subconscious, the dreamlike imagery, the exploration of the irrational.
Well, all those things we see in Rimbaud's work.
Yeah. Exactly. They were directly inspired by his use of symbolism, his bending of reality, his exploration of the inner landscape.
It's like he gave them permission to tap into those hidden realms of the mind and express them in their art.
Right. And then look at writers who carried that torch of his prose poetic style forward.
Okay, it's like who?
You can see echoes of Rimbaud in the stream of consciousness technique,
Hmm.
used by writers like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf that attempt to capture the flow of thought, the fluidity of consciousness, the blurring of the lines between inner and outer worlds.
Right.
That's something Rimbaud pioneered with his unique style.
He broke down the walls between poetry and prose, created this new form of expression that was both lyrical and raw, fragmented and cohesive.
And his influence goes beyond the literary world,
Yeah,
too.
for sure. So where else do we see it?
Think about the beat poets like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac.
Okay.
They were drawn to Rimbaud's spirit of rebellion, his rejection of bourgeois values, his search for authentic experience outside of societal norms. Their work is infused with that same raw energy, that same yearning for freedom and self-expression.
And you can see it in music, too.
Definitely.
Jim Morrison, Patti Smith, musicians who embraced poetry in their songwriting, who weren't afraid to tackle tough topics, push boundaries, create art that was beautiful but also unsettling.
Rimbaud's spirit of defiance lives on in their work.
It's amazing to think that a poet writing in the 19th century could have such a huge impact on 20th and even 21st century art.
It really is. It speaks to the universality of his themes, the lasting power of his vision.
It's a reminder that great art transcends time and place. It speaks to the core of human experience, tapping into something primal, something that resonates across generations and cultures.
Definitely.
So for someone encountering Rimbaud for the first time, what would you say is the essential takeaway?
Okay, so the core message they should take away from A Season in Hell.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing Rimbaud gives us is permission.
Well-
Permission to question, to doubt, to rebel, to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, both the light and the shadow.
Okay.
He shows us that it's okay to feel lost, to struggle, to search for meaning in a world that can feel chaotic and absurd.
He's a beacon for those who feel like outsiders, like they don't fit in.
Exactly.
He reminds us that there's strength and beauty in embracing our individuality and creating our own paths and seeking out our own truths.
And maybe most importantly, he shows us that even in the darkest of times, even when we feel completely lost and alone, there's always the possibility for transformation, for growth, for finding hope in the most unexpected places.
It's that message of hope, that belief in the power of the human spirit to endure and even thrive in the face of adversity. That makes Rimbaud's work so relevant today.
Absolutely.
So with that, we come to the end of our deep dives into A Season in Hell.
It's been a fascinating journey exploring this complex and enigmatic poet, and I hope this deep dive has inspired you to check out Rimbaud's work, to really wrestle with his ideas, and to discover the power of art, to challenge, to inspire, and to illuminate even the darkest corners of our world.
Thanks for listening.